What is the Feminist International Assistance Policy, and how much did it cost taxpayers over the last 10 years? That's a question that we're going to get in today. And there's an article here by the Western Standard. I'm going to get into it, and then I'll give a brief commentary. Revealed, Trudeau spent $11 billion on overseas gender programs during tenure. Trudeau promised to balance the budget by 2019. And I think there was even a year, I can't remember if it was like 2018 or something like that. There was a year where he actually was running a surplus up until the very last month. And then the Liberals just went crazy and just spent like $15 billion and ended up running like a $10 billion deficit that year. I don't know why they did that, but that's Liberal policy for you. It says, over the last 10 years, the Government of Canada has spent around $11.2 billion on overseas gender initiatives focusing on projects directly targeting gender equality and women's empowerment as outlined in Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, FIAP. The figure is a conservative estimate as it primarily includes gender-targeted aid and doesn't account for the full value of gender-integrated projects, which could add billions more if fully calculated. Trudeau announced FIAP in the House of Commons in 2017, emphasizing Canada's commitment to gender equality. Quote, "We are here today to launch Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, a policy that puts women and girls at the center of everything we do in international assistance, because we know that when women and girls thrive, everyone benefits," he says. Now, I did a little bit more research on the Feminist International Assistance Policy, and it appears that it does have some other directives, like also addressing climate change and global equality and things like that. And a lot of the goals of this initiative actually come from the UN's Agenda 2030 policy. So I'm not going to delve into that today, but this is more globalist policy. But what they've done is they've framed it as feminism, which probably plays really well with a lot of women voters. Now, I'm not against women's equality, but what I am against is spending my tax dollars to meddle in other countries' affairs overseas when there's a lot of problems to tackle here at home that are not being addressed. Trudeau promised to balance the budget by 2019 during the 2015 election, but instead ran 9 consecutive deficits. The largest was in 2023-24 with a deficit of $61.9 billion. So that would be the latest year that they've reported on. The highest outside of the COVID-19 period. Annual deficits averaged around 39 to 48 billion from 2020 to 2025, driven by pandemic spending, infrastructure, and social programs. Federal debt doubled from $693.8 billion in 2015 to an estimated $1.4 trillion by March 2025, according to the Fraser Institute. If you understand fractional reserve banking and how money is printed using quantitative easing, you understand that when the government borrows money, it's actually creating money, and that creates inflation. So if you're wondering why there's been a lot of inflation lately, it's because the government has been spending a lot of money lately. Now, that's not the only reason. The huge amount of debt created with all of the home price increases, that also has a lot to do with it. But basically, the more debt that gets pushed into a system, the higher the inflation level goes. Pre-person debt rose by 14,127 inflation adjusted from 2014-15 to 2023-24, with debt servicing costs hitting $53.7 billion in 2024-25, or $1,301 per person more than federal GST revenue. So in other words, every year, $1,301 of your money goes to pay the interest on the debt. And it's actually worse than that, because how many people are net taxpayers? Probably well less than 50%. A lot of people are children, or elderly, or they make so little money that they receive more money in government benefits than they pay in taxes. So really, for the people that are net taxpayers, I don't know exactly what the number would be, but it could be extremely high. Pre-COVID deficits were smaller, $18.1 billion in 2018-19, but pandemic spending and ongoing spending in health, climate, and Indigenous reconciliation pushed debt higher. Critics like the Fraser Institute argue much of the spending was wasteful, while Trudeau government framed it as necessary for economic recovery and social equity. Now remember, social equity is different than equality. Equality is that everybody is treated equally and has the same opportunities. Equality would be equal under the law. Equity would be trying to force everybody to be equal, even when that's not true. So an example of social equity would be, a lot of the DEI initiatives where you try to have a certain number of, let's say, women on the police force to balance things out, even if there's not very many women applicants that are capable of doing the job properly. This ends up causing all sorts of problems, which I'm not specifically going to talk about today. Getting back to the $11 billion that was spent in the Feminist International Assistance Policy, I have a few problems with it. One of them is that when we are running consistent yearly budget deficits, I'm not sure why the government feels that they have money to spend when they have to borrow the money to give it to other countries. I really have a problem with this. Another is if they have $11 billion to send overseas for various projects like this, then why don't they have money for other more pressing projects here at home? So for example, you've got basically record levels of food bank usage. You've got very high levels of homelessness. You've got a housing unaffordability crisis. You've got a healthcare system that is really starting to fail. They're using money that they're basically borrowing that we either shouldn't be spending at all, or if we are spending that money, it should be used here in Canada. Another thing that I didn't mention would be on infrastructure projects, like look at the state of our road systems and things like that. And then, of course, another big issue I have is the accountability of where the money is going and to who, and is the money even accomplishing the goal that it set out to achieve. I would have to do further research on this program, but I have a feeling like a lot of other charity type programs where the government's just giving super large sums of money to other countries or nonprofits in other parts of the world, that there's probably not a lot of detailed accounting of where the money goes, who's getting it, and how it's getting spent. And there's plenty of opportunities when you're giving out $11 billion for something that's probably fairly hard to quantify. Like, did you achieve your goal of bringing gender equality to a certain country? Like, are you tracking that? Is there some way to quantify that? Right? When there's really no way to measure something, you can basically appeal to your voting base and make it seem like you're doing all this good, but really there's just a ton of opportunities for corruption and for money to get siphoned off to political insiders or people. This is a lot like the money that's sent over to Ukraine, where, yeah, a lot of it can be tracked and traced, but very large amounts of it, we have no idea where it even went. And, people are probably just stealing a lot of it. We've seen with Dodge in the United States, the amount of, just ridiculous spending that came out of USAID. And I have a feeling that these types of government programs here in Canada are much the same, where there's just billions of dollars going into this black hole and there's really no accountability for it. So anyways, if you want change, I would suggest that you support the Conservative government in the next election. Take care, guys.